The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to the overview of the new contract for services under $10,000 template, or the CFS under $10,000 for short. I'm Aaron Rosenthal, Assistant Director of Contracts and Systems for UIC Purchasing, and I'm here today with Bradley Henson, Associate Director of Contracts for UIUC Purchasing, and Darren Strader, Associate Director of University Payables. We have a very large group of attendees on the line with us today, so a huge thank you to everyone for participating. We're really excited to share more about the updated contract template with you. We're going to start out by highlighting a few key areas in the GoToWebinar interface. First, on the left side of the controls is an orange arrow, which is the Auto Hide button. You can click the Auto Hide button to minimize or display the control panel. Second, there is a yellow hand button, which is how you raise your hand. At this time, I'd like to ask everyone to please raise their hand to let us know that you can hear us and see the PowerPoint that we're displaying. I see the hands are going up. I'll give everyone just another minute to test out that functionality. Thank you. I'm now going to go ahead and lower everyone's hands. Last, please draw your attention to the questions field that I'm showing at the center of the screen. Due to the extremely large number of attendees for today's session, we have disabled audio for participants. However, we'd still love to answer your questions. If you have a question at any time, please type it in this questions field and click send. You can submit a question throughout the session. Darren will be monitoring them, and we have time reserved at the end to answer your questions. We'll start today by providing some general background on the recent template updates. We'll then cover key aspects of the CFS under $10,000 template, including how to initiate, execute, and submit the template for payment. We'll touch on relevant policy and web page updates, and at the end of today's session, representatives from Purchasing and University Payables will be available to answer any questions that you may have. Please be advised, this webinar is intended to be a high-level overview, and we strongly recommend that units carefully read all of the detailed instructions that are provided with the CFS under $10,000 template. On October 5th, 2015, the OBFS contracting offices announced an increase in the contract template signature threshold, along with updates to several contract templates and related policies. Procurement Services updated both of its primary contract templates. First, the template that used to be called the Professional and Artistic Services under $5,000 template became the Contract for Services under $10,000 template, or the CFS under $10,000 for short. Second, the template that used to be called the U of I Services $5,000 or more template became the Contract for Procurement of Services, or the POS template for short. This webinar will focus entirely on the CFS under $10,000 template. One key update related to the CFS under $10,000 template is that it increased the unit template dollar threshold from $5,000 to $10,000. The CFS under $10,000 template replaces the old Professional and Artistic Services under $5,000 template. This updated template is still a unit template, which means that if it's unmodified and the total dollar amount for the life of the contract is under $10,000, you can process the contract without purchasing involvement. The CFS under $10,000 template is a services contract and should not be used to purchase goods or supplies. The template instructions also contain a list of services that are specifically prohibited for use on this template. On the screen is the full list of services that are prohibited for use on the CFS under $10,000 template. For example, services for the support or provision of patient care are prohibited on this template. The CFS under $10,000 template should not be used to contract for physicians. Units should contact purchasing if they're ever unsure about whether a service is prohibited. The CFS under $10,000 template is limited to a term of 1 year and no renewals are allowed. The CFS under $10,000 template, when submitted for payment in TEM, should not be used for multiple payments. If multiple payments are necessary, then the unit should submit the executed template, including the instruction pages, to their campus purchasing department to be processed with a purchase order. The Purchase Contracting for Services website and template instructions will be updated very soon with instructions regarding submission of the template to purchasing for multiple payments. Please note the multiple payment instructions will vary by campus. For UIUC and UIS, we ask that the department add CFS in the banner requisition comments field and CFS in the subject line of the email to purchasing to allow easy identification of the template on intake. For UIC, if you require multiple payments, please initiate an I-Buy requisition on the route to purchasing form, attach the executed template contract as an internal attachment, and add CFS to the beginning of the internal notes section. Again, we'll be updating the Contract for Services website and the template instructions very soon with all of those detailed instructions on how to handle multiple payments. Please also note, stringing is strictly prohibited. Stringing is the dividing or planning of procurements to avoid use of competitive procedures. At this time, I'm going to hand things over to Brad Henson, who is going to talk about some key provisions of the CFS under $10,000 instructions.
Great, thanks Aaron. Good morning everyone. The instructions page. Page 3 of the CFS under 10,000 template instructions has several questions that the unit must answer if they are contracting with an individual. This is similar to what appeared in the under 5,000 template, but please make note of this. The instruction sheet. If contracting with an individual and the answer to any of these questions is yes, the CFS under 10,000 template cannot be used, and you should contact your purchasing office for additional assistance. Business entity type. Article 1 of the CFS under 10,000 contract is where the basic party information is filled in. Please note that there's a very important field after the vendor's name where the vendor's business type needs to be filled in. Business type refers to what type of entity the vendor is, such as a corporation, sole proprietor, LLC, LLP, etc. And is important information if the contract is ever involved in litigation. Execution. As long as the CFS under 10,000 template is unmodified and the total cost remains under 10,000 for the life of the contract, the unit head is authorized to sign without the need to run the contract through purchasing. If any sort of modification is made, whether it's the vendor crossing out a word, attaching an exhibit, please contact the purchasing office on your campus for assistance. To ensure that your contract is properly executed, please be mindful of this 3-piece execution checklist. First, if the contract is with an individual, the unit must answer the questions on page 3 of the template instructions. Second, the unit must ensure that signatures are obtained on page 7 of the contract. And finally, there are state certifications that follow the main contract document. Please note that certification number 32 is not applicable, so the vendor does not need to check the box there. However, all 3 items, the instructions, the contract, and state certifications, must be kept together as the complete contract. The signature block. The signature block for the CFS under 10,000 template functions largely the same as the one under the old $5,000 template. Again, so long as the template is unmodified, the unit head signs instead of someone in OBFS. The unit head signs the 2 lines below where it says the Board of Trustees of the University of Illinois. On the top of those 2 lines, they will actually sign Walter K. Knorr for the comptroller, and on the bottom of the 2 lines, they will sign their own name. The right side of the signature block is where the vendor will sign. Please note their actual signature appears on the line that says by : with the printed name on the next line. The department should have the vendor sign first, and full execution is a signature and date. Amendment. The new CFS under 10,000 template, units are authorized to make 1 amendment by using a new amendment to contract for services under 10,000 template in 3 specific situations that are outlined in the template instructions. 1, to modify the scope of work. 2, to increase or decrease the cost as long as the total cost remains under 10,000 for the life of the contract. Or 3, to extend the term of the contract as long as the total term of the amended contract does not exceed 12 months. Again, please note that only 1 amendment is allowed per contract. Also, the amendment must be executed before the contract is submitted in TEM for payment. At this time, I'm going to turn this over to Darren for some additional TEM information.
Thanks, Brad. Well, first of all, we want to make sure that one of the first parts of the whole process is to make sure that you've submitted a vendor ad form to our department so they can check and make sure that the vendor is not on a excluded parties list, and that their tax ID number matches what the IRS has. And if they're a brand new vendor, then you'll have to wait to get the vendor number back that it was set up for this. Next slide. Submit in TEM using the purpose miscellaneous payments to vendors, non-employees, and students. You can see in the middle bottom of the screen the purpose that you select when you're creating an expense report. Make sure you use the miscellaneous payments for vendors, non-employees, and students. That's where most of the service-related account codes reside, and so you should be able to find what you need when you use that purpose. Okay, the next slide. Very important. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner where you have all the information like the payee name, UIN, all that good stuff. There's a field called contract number. Okay, in that field where the pointer is right now, you need to put CFS, Contract for Services, in that field, and that helps us, all of procurement services, recognize that this is a contract for services payment, and that we can use that to further help on down the line when we're going to be doing some post-pay auditing on these contracts. I think I have one more. Okay, and then uploading the documentations into TEM, we would need the completed instruction page and contract executed. All that Brad had just gone over needs to be on the contract before it's submitted for payment. And we would also need the amendment if applicable, and vendor invoice if available. It's nice to have, but it's not required. We recognize the fact that most of the payment information is contained within the contract document itself, so it ought to be able to serve as well as an invoice, but a lot of places do actually send an invoice. So I think I'm going to be turning it back over to Brad, and he's going to be talking a little bit about some post-audit activity.
Yep, thanks, Aaron. All right, post-audit. So units should be aware purchasing will be performing a quarterly post-audit on CFS under 10,000 template contracts. TEM will house the audit file information. The initial post-audit will include all CFS under 10,000 contracts, with subsequent audits potentially focusing just on a sample. And purchasing will reach out to units for which templates were not used properly. New contracts should not be initiated on the old professional and artistic services under 5,000 templates. Procurement Services recognizes that units may have initiated contracts on the old P&A under 5 templates prior to October 5th of 2015. Accordingly, University Payables will process for payments in the TEM system P&A under 5 template contracts that are executed on or before November 2nd of 2015. Any P&A agreement under 5,000 template contract that is executed after November 2nd will be rejected by UPay. So after November 2nd, you need to use the new template. Policy and web page updates. Sections 1, 8, and 17.1 of the OBFS policies and procedures have been updated to be consistent with the updates to the CFS under 10,000 templates. And we encourage you to carefully review those sections. Each time you initiate a contract on the CFS under 10,000 template, please go to the OBFS contract forms page and download a fresh template. The latest version of the template will always be located there.
Okay, questions? Let's see, I'll
see
if we have one. We have several so far. And the first question is, I see that services for children are prohibited. We have used P&A contracts in the past to pay leaders of robotics clubs in schools, and the members of those clubs are children, so is this allowed? I think that's probably a procurement thing. Aaron, do you have any, or Brad have anything you can add to that?
Yeah, Darren, I would say that sounds like a pretty specific factual situation.
It does.
Just like
it
the
really
instructions
does.
say, I would strongly encourage the submitter of that question to contact their campus purchasing department. We could talk a little bit more about exactly what you're trying to do and whether it falls under that exception.
Very good. So Joan LeMay, you should contact your campus purchasing office, and so you can work that out. I see another question from the department. So we cannot hire the former employee as a consultant under the new template, or is just not the same service?
It sounds like that question is getting at some of those questions that are in the instructions of the template regarding whether this is a former employee, et cetera. And the issue there is that if you're potentially contracting with a former employee, there are potential HR as well as tax implications. So just like the instructions of the template state, if any of those boxes are answered yes in the instructions, you cannot, in fact, use this particular template. That's another situation, though, where if one of those questions is yes, I would strongly encourage you to contact your campus purchasing department, and we can facilitate the necessary conversations with tax, HR, et cetera, to determine the appropriate way to go forward.
Very good. Juluna asked the question, should the amendment be executed before services are provided? I would think that the amendment before they're provided is the correct answer. Did I hear you say, Brad?
Yeah, yes. You should always have the amendment executed before the services are provided. That's with obviously even with the contract itself. So yes, have it executed before services are provided.
Very good. Okay, our next question is kind of a long question, and I see the word insurance in there, Aaron, so here we go. We have many small contracts that are used for services by individuals, including many in other countries. These individuals do not carry insurance, and the work is extremely low risk. How do we request a waiver of the insurance requirement and process an agreement with that change if approved?
Sure, and it's worth noting that we worked really closely with risk management on the development of this template and updated insurance language. And after the webinar, I would strongly encourage everyone to take a really close look at the insurance language that was finalized for the contract for services under $10,000 template. Where we ended up was really trying to craft some language that was as unburdensome as possible to vendors. And it gets a little technical and nuanced, but a lot of the core idea of the language that was included in the template is that the vendor essentially needs to carry insurance comparable to similarly situated vendors. So there aren't any specific coverage limits that are listed there. If, however, a vendor does come back, even with this less restrictive language, and expresses a concern about not carrying sufficient insurance, I'd say here in Chicago, we'd encourage you to contact your campus purchasing department, and we can help you with that. And Brad, is that the same process in Urbana?
Yes, I would do that the same.
Okay.
Yep. Contact
Very
us.
good. And so another question, so we can still process invoices under the old $5,000 templates if they were executed before 11/2 of 2015. I believe that is correct.
Yes.
Anything after 11/2 needs to be on the new form.
Exactly. And the real big driver there is the actual signing of the contract. So it's possible that you signed a contract, had an old under 5 contract signed in October, but the services are taking place over the course of the next year. So long as that contract was fully executed prior to November 2nd, that's going to be accepted for payment.
Good. So if we do have a banner requisition, we don't need to fill out the template then, correct? I think there might be some confusion here. So if you do a banner requisition, you don't have to do a banner requisition. Am I correct, Aaron and Brad?
Yeah, the only situation where you're doing a requisition along with this template is the situation where you're requiring multiple payments. And let me just reiterate that we've been having some conversation to finalize the processes and the protocol for submitting those multiple payment contract for services under $10,000. So I would encourage everyone to take a close look at the updated instructions and updated contracting for services website that we're going to release very shortly in the near future. But the idea is basically that traditionally you're doing a contract for services. The typical situation is a single payment situation. And so long as you have a single payment, you're going to be submitting this template along with the instructions and the attachments in TEM for payment. The only time when a requisition comes into the mix is if you in fact require multiple payments along with this contract for services under $10,000. So in that situation, you're still going to be having the contract for services filled out, fully executed, but then instead of submitting that contract for services in TEM for payment, you're going to be submitting a requisition to purchasing for them to create a purchase order as the payment mechanism. Here in Chicago, that will be an iBuy requisition, and again, we'll give you some clear instructions on exactly what to put on that iBuy requisition to make sure that it's clear that it's a contract for services. And Brad, do you want to speak to the UIUC piece?
Yeah, then in UIUC, we would submit it through Banner, the CFS in the comments field, and we would process it very similar and identical to the multiple payments that were done on the under 5,000 template. Create a standing purchase order so that those multiple payments can be facilitated on that purchase order.
Good answer. Let's see. How much time must go by before you can execute a new contract with the same vendor?
That question gets at our fine purchasing, legislative, and regulatory framework. I mean, again, we're going to go back. Let me flip back a couple slides to this concept of stringing. And the idea is that you should never be artificially breaking up a purchase to avoid the purchasing requirements and to do what is known as stringing. Did I miss the slide? Let me flip back there.
There it is.
Here we go, about no stringing. So if you have a project today with a particular vendor, and let's say a year from now, 2 years from now, you have a completely new project, a need that you didn't foresee at the time of that original one, that would not be stringing. But again, sticking to this idea that if you know today that you have multiple needs with a particular vendor, and those multiple needs collectively exceed the small purchase limit or exceed the threshold of this template, you should not be breaking that part artificially.
Okay. Can the contract span fiscal years? I believe it can.
You want to take that one, Brad? And I've got the slide up right now as well.
Yeah, it certainly can. It's limited to 12 months. So if you have a fully executed contract that you executed in March, it can go through March of the following year. So yes, you can.
And in the case of submitting it for a one-time payment in TEM, it's just getting submitted for a single payment at some point in time. If you were talking about the situation where you're talking about a multiple payment situation, you've followed this process for multiple payments where you've submitted a requisition of purchasing and created a purchase order, that's probably the one situation where you should be in close contact with your purchasing campus office just to make sure that there's an appropriate purchase order in place for each of the fiscal years that it's crossing.
Yep. Good point, Aaron. Thanks.
Okay, the next question is, what about revenue contracts? We may have utility sales to research park entities. Is that a fairly specific, maybe departmentally specific question, or what about?
Yeah, I'd say that we would defer on being able to answer the particular factual scenario here, but as far as the larger question of revenue contracts, the focus of this webinar today and all of the presenters are from procurement services. So we're talking about the situation where we have an expenditure of under $10,000. Within OBFS, within the contracting units, we do know that the various revenue generating contracting units recently rolled out some updates to their templates as well. So we would strongly encourage you to follow up with your campus revenue generating contracting office, as well as I understand that they're offering some training and support on their recent updates as well. So they would be the best parties to follow up with on any revenue generating questions.
Thank you. What about honorariums? Can we use this template for honorariums?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so. Honorarium, if anybody's charging you an honorarium that's over, $4,999.99, then it really probably needs to have a different kind of contract, I'd almost assume, wouldn't it? Aaron,
yeah, in the case of honorariums, I would say that everyone should really closely review the language on the OBFS website in regards to the definition of an honorarium. It's a very, very specific situation that is typically not the situation that you're utilizing this template for. This template is intended to be for an expenditure.
Correct. Not a token appreciation of being a speaker or an honored person at the university.
Correct.
Okay. Can multiple units contract with the same vendor at the same time as long as the services are not the same?
Do you want to take that one, Brad?
Yeah, generally I would say that you can, but again, going back to Aaron's point of stringing, obviously, some researchers or some some aspects of projects can be divided up into different units. So it really is going to depend on the facts and the circumstances. But if you have two separate units using one person for different scopes of work, that's acceptable. And if you have questions, I would definitely contact your purchasing office on the campus before you engage, so that we make sure that it is correct.
Okay, here's a question that's kind of similar or relates to one we've already discussed. Can a vendor enter into a contract after having had a previous contract for similar rendered services?
And we'll probably start to sound like a broken record on some of these questions as far as the party line that we're going back to. But again, we are all operating in this highly regulated world of Illinois state procurement. And we just have to keep going back to that idea of stringing. If you know today that you have a multiple year need, a need that exceeds the bid limit, a need that exceeds the $10,000 that this template can be used for, if you know that today, you shouldn't be breaking things apart. If a completely new need comes up with a vendor, a year from now, 2 years from now, and it wasn't a need that you were aware of at the time of your original contract, there is not a prohibition against contracting with a vendor more than once. Again, really strongly adhering to this idea that you should not be artificially breaking something apart.
Right. And almost on a similar line, we usually have a speaker come to the university for a college welcome in August. We want to use this same person we've previously used. Would we still use the contract? Is that correct? So every year, they use the same person comes and speaks.
Yeah, again, if it's truly a new independent need, you're not avoiding stringing, that would be acceptable. And this is the template that replaces that old under $5,000 template. So long as the total dollar amount for the life of the contract does not exceed, stays under $10,000, this would be the new template that you would utilize for that.
Good. Okay, here's a question. At UIC, for a multiple payment contract, does the vendor have to be an iBuy, or can a rec PO be entered directly into Banner? This is specifically asking for the UIC campus. So Aaron, I would defer to you.
Yeah, here at Chicago, we are going to be utilizing iBuy as the means for units to route us requisitions that relate to a need for multiple payments on the contract for services under $10,000. I think that part of what this question may be getting at is this question of whether a vendor is an iBuy or not. Historically, there were some vendors that had been in Banner but not in iBuy for various reasons. We've been really focused over the past couple years on getting that iBuy vendor record as in sync with the Banner vendor record as possible. So the answer would be yes. The requisition would need to be submitted in iBuy, and I would steer you towards that same information that's currently on the University Payables website regarding if you happen to come across a vendor who's currently in Banner but not iBuy, and that would probably only be the case at this point because we haven't done business with them recently. If that's the case, there's some instructions on that vendor maintenance page as far as how to get them synced over to iBuy.
Terrific. Here's another example of multiple sorts of contracts for the same person. We use consultants that are paid, for example, $300 one time to be a presenter at a workshop. Then in a few months later, they may do the same thing. Does this mean we should do a contract each time for each event that the speakers are at?
Well,
is it the same exact event? I mean,
yeah. If the department knows or has a known need and know that they're going to be presenting 2, 3, 4 times a year, at $300 each time, that's a multiple payment situation. You wouldn't necessarily need to have a new contract each time. You could set that up at least on UIUC campus. You'd sign the contract, submit the requisition with the signed contract, and we could process it as a standing purchase order so you can make those multiple payments.
Yeah, I'd concur with that, Brad. If you know today that you're going to need to use this consultant a couple times over the course of the next year, you can go ahead and utilize the contract again in this multiple payment scenario to capture the fact that that you have this ongoing, multiple service need, as opposed to breaking this apart artificially.
Mhm.
Right. Can multiple payments still be processed through TEM if the contract was fully executed prior to 11/2/2015? I think all the same rules apply for the old contract as long as it was executed before the cutoff date. Am I wrong, fellas?
Yeah, I mean, we
Yeah.
defer to you on that one, Darren, as far as
Okay,
how
I
to
would say
handle
that that's what we would do, because if it was fully executed, properly executed before the cutoff date, then all the old rules still apply. So yes, we would be able to process multiple payment contracts. Okay, here's a question. You say this contract can only be used once a year. What if I had someone who provided a service twice a year, once in August and once in May? They don't want to wait almost a year to get paid. What can we do? We don't use the same person every year, so it's not like we're trying to string or not hire someone. I think that's still going to be a case of a multiple payment. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think it's just important to clarify the first sentence of that question, that we said the contract can be only used once a year. That's not really what we were stating. The idea is that the overall term of a contract for services under $10,000 contract, that term is limited to 1 year or less. So anytime you're executing one of these contracts, the maximum term of this contract is 12 months with no renewal. As far as being able to use the contract more than once, this is that same theme of stringing and artificially breaking things apart again. If a truly independent new need that you didn't foresee comes up, then you can enter into another contract. The 1 year is the term of an individual contract for services under $10,000 contract.
Okay. For multiple payments, do you have to upload the contract for service template into ICS to submit to campus purchasing? That's going to have to be
that one, Darren.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Aaron.
Where we ended up with this template in ICS is that the under $10,000 template is not a template that's physically living in ICS for you to create contracts off of it within ICS itself. So regardless of whether you're a unit that's live in ICS or not, you're still going to go ahead and download the contract for services under $10,000 contract template from the OBFS contract forms website. You'll complete it with the vendor manually, get it fully executed, and then if you happen to be live in ICS, you have the option, once the contract is fully executed, of storing a fully executed contract, importing it into ICS for future reference for historical filing information, but the contract is not getting created in ICS and it's not getting submitted in ICS. So regardless of whether or not you are live in ICS or not, if it's a single payment situation, you're submitting in TEM for payment, and if it's a multiple payment situation, you're going to be working with your campus purchasing office, submitting a requisition for a purchase order to get created.
Thanks.
Yep.
Is there a way to tell in Banner what business type of vendor is, or how do we get the accurate information for that field? This was submitted by Teresa Summers. Teresa, I'm going to tell you that I don't know the correct answer for that, but I will find out for you what it is that we can do, and we will include all of the answers to these questions when we do our wrap-up. So stay tuned for that one.
That'll be helpful to verify, Darren.
Exactly,
and if we end up at a place where there isn't a field in Banner that reflects that, and we can confirm that, if there's not, the vendor should really be the party that knows how they're currently organized.
What their status is, yeah.
Exactly. So, this is, again, corporation, LLC, sole proprietorship. So as you're going out and filling in that field information, the vendor should be able to steer you in the right direction, but we can confirm, like Darren said, whether there's a way for us to officially recognize that in Banner.
if the contract requires check in hand for a performance, will the EPR process and TEM be accepted? And so I'm going to say right now, I believe that we will still use the EPR method for payments that have to be accelerated. So Bill, yes, you would be able to still use that EPR nomenclature in the description of what the payment's for. Okay, if the contract is fully executed and we need to do an I-buy order, do we have to wait until the PO is set up for the work to start? That has a lot of elements, Aaron, and Brad, that inquire.
I guess my first question would be, are you thinking of a multiple payment scenario or a one-time payment? If it's fully executed and it's a one-time payment for the service, you would just submit it through TEM for payment. I don't know why you would need a purchase order unless you're wanting multiple payments.
Okay.
Right. And if they are talking about that multiple payment situation, though, which would be the only case where you'd be submitting a requisition, and here in Chicago, that would be an I-buy order. Yes, you should wait until that purchase order is created before the work starts. Essentially, you're going to get the contract fully executed, submit it to purchasing, and that's going to be a purchase order that we can turn around quite quickly. We're not going to be reviewing the contract as far as what got filled out and any of that core contract information. That's going to be reserved for post-audit. We're really just going to be ensuring that the contract's signed and ultimately creating that purchase order. So you should wait until, in those multiple payment situations, you want to wait until the purchase order is created before work starts. Again, this is going to be an actual purchase order that's getting created that University Payables is going to be utilizing for those invoices to get paid against, and we don't want to risk any possibility that an invoice comes in that's dated prior to the PO creation date and questions of non-conforming come up.
Correct.
Yeah, and that would be the same for UIUC too. You know, you would need the purchase order set up before you engage in service for those multiple payments and scenarios.
Right. During this next one that came in, we're getting some really, really factually specific questions. People are asking if those are considered stringing. You know, for purposes of this webinar, we can just state, again, this idea of stringing. You should not be artificially breaking apart purchases. If you have a really unique situation with some factual specifics that you need to ask about, you should contact your campus purchasing office, and we can help you with that directly. It's really hard to tackle those factually specific scenarios in the context of this webinar.
Okay. I do see Patricia Garcia sent in a question, says, is there a specific person in contract in purchasing, a person we contacted purchasing if we're have any questions regarding the contract? I don't know if there's any. There probably are specific people that could work, but you'd probably just call the general number for your purchasing office on your campus, and they would be able to
right now. Yeah, especially in the early stages of this template's deployment, here at UIC, you can go ahead and contact me directly. And I saw there was a question for someone that hopped on a little late in the webinar as far as who is presenting. So again, I'm Aaron Rosenthal, Assistant Director of Contracts and Systems for UIC Purchasing, and you can contact me directly for any questions on the UIC campus about this template. And Brad, how would you like UIUC handled?
Same, contact you. No, I'm just kidding. No, you would contact me, Brad Henson, at the UIUC campus.
Very good.
I mean, it's conceivable that we'll get to a point where we want to kind of redirect everything back to our general intake email addresses, but at least for now, we know that you all have a lot of questions about this template. We know that there's a lot of things that are evolving with it, so go ahead and reach out to those primary contract resources directly.
Great. Bill Thomas says, sent in an FYI that says, to check vendor category in Banner, you go to FTM Vend, and then click on the Vendor Types tab, and it will show you whether or not the vendor is a sole proprietorship, corporation, etc. So thank you, Bill, for finding out that for us so quickly. And I saw a lot of questions about whether or not, there's going to be information provided after that. I think that, don't we intend to post the webinar at one point?
Yes, we
And
are
some of,
recording this entire webinar. I saw there was a question that came in about whether we can put together some sort of a frequently asked questions about the questions that are coming up in this webinar and other questions we're receiving. I think that sounds like a great idea. What do you think, Brad and Darren? And that's certainly
yeah, I
something we
think so
can
too.
supplement our other materials with. But the webinar itself will be posted for people who can participate. We're going to, just a heads up to everyone on the call that like most things that get deployed, we're refining things as we learn new questions and concerns that people have. So we will likely be posting an updated version of the instructions along with the template in the very near future, again, to clarify some of those processes around multiple payments. But we can certainly supplement all of that with some other, FAQ documents and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we had a question that just came in that said we have at UIUC we have net 30 payout, which we net 30 payment terms. If the vendor wants payment, say, in net 15, regardless of multiple payments or one-time payments, should we then would the contract then have to go to purchasing? Okay, so if anything other than net 30 payment terms, which is referred to in the contract, Brad or Aaron, if that wanted to be changed, is that an amendment, or you can't do it this way, or what would be the proper way to handle that?
Yeah, that would be a change to the template. So that would, if a vendor insists on a net 15 rather than net 30, then you would not be able to use the template because that would be a material change to that agreement.
Okay, and just for my edification, I guess, and others that might be listening having the same question, can we, Brad, could you review again what the amendment kind of does, what it's used for?
Sure.
And let me flip back to that. Yeah, I'm going to flip back to that slide.
I think this might have a good application here for people to help understand that.
So it's a one-time amendment. You can change the scope of service. You can change the dollar amount up or down, but it can't exceed 10,000. And you can change the term as long as it doesn't extend past the 12-month time frame. So if you contracted for someone for $5,000, it was going to take 4 months. You're in month 3 and you realize that it's going to take 2 more months and it's going to be additional $1,000. You do an amendment to increase that dollar amount and to increase that term of the contract to encompass that project.
Right, but
there's
no provision in the amendment to say, okay, now it's going to be net 15 terms.
Right.
Correct. Our typical payment term would be that net 30. There is, however, currently a lot of discussion going on around the rules related to expedited payment requests. Darren, my understanding as of right now, we certainly don't want to encourage it, but it is possible for a unit, if necessary, to submit an expedited payment request to support the contract for services under $10,000 template,
really
but probably more to come.
Right. There's really got to be a very precise and exact business purpose for an expedited payment request, just because it takes it out of the natural workflow, so to speak, and it makes it subject to other kinds of activity that deals with more than one department after that. So yes, we would prefer that you don't, but it can be done. Okay, let's see. Does an EPR override the normal 30 days? Yes, it does, June. If you put in EPR, then we're going to make that an expedited payment request in the terms that normally the information in the vendor setup that normally handles the payment term will be overridden because of the fact you put in EPR.
And again, just to highlight again the point that Darren made, we should only be doing expedited payment requests if there's a compelling true need by the vendor for this expedited payment request. And we understand that may occasionally be the case, but more often than not, a vendor just preferring to get paid a little bit quicker, especially in this budgetary environment, is not sufficient reason to process one of those expedited payment requests.
Very good. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. We had a lot of great questions. We still have time. About 10 minutes if anybody has any other things they want to discuss. Oh, here we go. Oh, who are the presenters? Again, I'm Darren Strader. I'm Associate Director of University Payables. And on the line with me is Aaron Rosenthal, who's the Assistant Director of Procurement Services on the UIC campus. And we have Brad Hinson, who is the Associate Director of Purchases on the Urbana campus.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, a huge thank you to everyone for taking the time to participate in today's webinar. There was also a question about whether slides will be available, and that's something that we can post as well. This was the second of our 2 webinar sessions, so now that all the questions have been answered, we can go ahead and make a note to post that as well. We greatly appreciate everyone's support on this new template. We were really excited to roll out the increased template threshold and to work with all of you to make this a successful experience. So thank you to everyone. Anything else you want to add, Brad or Darren?
Nope. No, thanks everyone for participating.
All right.
All right. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye.